Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the London Borough of Newham Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Can everyone present hear me? And if you can, kindly raise your hands like so. Okay, so majority of the hands have been raised, so thank you very much. This evening's meeting is held virtually via Zoom due to the coronavirus pandemic. In the interest of safety, members of the public, and protect members of the public and councillors and officers, the meeting is held virtually. The members of the viewing public can view this meeting via Newham YouTube page. For this meeting, we will be aided by Roger Raymond as Overview and Scrutiny Officer and Janine Jenkins as the meeting clerk. I also want to remind members that if a vote is taken at any time, it will be by means of raising your hands like so, so that it can be captured on screen. I therefore declare this meeting of the London Borough of Newham Overview and Scrutiny Committee open, so this meeting is called to order. Welcome to you all. I would like to welcome everyone, and I would especially like to welcome Paul Underwood to his first meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. He will be the representative for the local Roman Catholic diocese, and he will also be a member of the Children and Scrutiny Committee. Welcome to your first meeting.
Thank you.
Apologies for absence, item 2. Is there any apologies for absence?
Hello, Chair. Got apologies from Councillor Jahan and Conrad Hall.
Okay. Is that noted?
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, the clerk would note that we have apologies from those two individuals. Declaration of interest, item 3. Is there any member wishing to declare an interest? The clerk would note that no members wishes to declare an interest. Item 4. We have 2 minutes to dispense with this evening. We have minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee that was held on the 16th of March, and also minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of April. These can be found in our supplementary agenda. Is there any matters arising, any issues of accuracy, correctness? Is there any member? Okay, in the absence of any members indicating that they wish to contribute to this item, I now move as a correct record the minutes of the last 2 meetings of the London Borough of Newham's Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on the 16th of March and the 1st of April 2021. Do I have a seconder? Okay, I saw 2 persons. So Councillor Lee Parkway, I seconded the minutes. Thank you. We now move to item 5 of the agenda. And item 5 of the agenda is dealing with the parking debt write-off. For this, I do recognize that we have Councillor Terry Paul at this meeting and Councillor James Asser. I think it's Councillor Asser's report. And I know that you have officers, I'm Jamie Blake and also Andrew Ward, who's supposed to be supporting you for this item. James, are you going to introduce the item?
Yes, Chair, I'll introduce it. Would it be helpful on the way, obviously you've got new members on, if I, Terry and the officers did a quick introduction of who we are first?
Yep.
Because I'm aware we've got a new co-opted member, and welcome as well. So I'm Councillor James Astor. I'm the Cabinet Member for Environment, Highways and Sustainable Transport, and Parking Service comes under my portfolio.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening to you, Paul, your first meeting. My name's Councillor Terry Paul. I'm the Cabinet Member for Finance and Corporate Services.
If I just go round the officers I've got here, so if I start with Jamie Blake.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Jamie Blake. I'm the Corporate Director for Environment and Sustainable Transport. So I've got overall responsibility for delivering parking services, as well as a range of other transport and environmental services.
And I've got Sarah Randall.
Good evening, my name is Sarah Randall. I'm the Assistant Director for Traffic and Parking. I joined Newham in February of this year. I have responsibility for the enforcement team that responds to contraventions on the highway, respond to all representations for penalty charge notices, and I manage the car pound.
And Jamie Cook.
Good evening, I'm Jamie Cook. I'm the new Director for Highways, Transportation and Parking, having started in my role in February this year. I've got overall responsibility for Highways, Transportation and Parking Services. My accountability in relation to this particular paper is to ensure that we improve our future processes to avoid writing off such a significant amount of bad debt in the future.
Yeah.
And from the finance side, I've got Rahima Ali.
Good evening, Rahima Ali, Head of Finance for Environment and Sustainable Transport. I joined Newham in January 2021. I'm responsible for providing business partnering support to the Environment and Sustainable Transport Directorate, reporting into Andrew Ward.
And last but not least, Andrew Ward.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Paul. Welcome. Yes, my name is Andrew Ward. I am the Assistant Director of Finance and Transformation. So that's a Deputy 151 role, reporting into Conrad Hall, who you heard gave his apologies tonight. So a large part of my role as Deputy 151 is to ensure financial control across the council, and of course the production of our statement of accounts at year end. Oh, and I joined all the way back in June 2020.
So I note that most of the officers are new to the council. So they, so it seems that the executive politicians are the prominent members. Yeah. And the officers seems to be the new ones that are joining us. Okay. James, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Yes, so we've got lots of new people, which I think people are probably aware of. There's lots of new faces, as we've been doing quite a lot of work in terms of reshaping the departments and bringing in new management and new skills to try and resolve some historic issues, but also kind of set the department up to work efficiently in the future. And so some of the people who are here, we have poached from other places, and I know some of you have also been on interview panels to help with this. So thank you for those of you who volunteered your time for that. So I'll just go quickly through the cabinet, well, an intro to the cabinet report, which is obviously what has been called for in terms of tonight's discussion. So the paper that was presented to cabinet was to approve and got signed off by cabinet to write off irrecoverable debt related to penalty charge notices over the period 2014 to 2020. A significant a majority of that relates to the 2014-18 period, some is the 2018 period since, and some does relate back to the very tail end of the 2010-2014 period. During that financial period, we issued obviously a significant number of parking tickets and PCNs over that period, and collected in around £60 million, which I think relates to somewhere in the order of 2/3 of what we issued and collected back in. The reason for the debt being deemed irrecoverable fall into 4 categories, full details of which are within the paper that you have in front of you. But they are basically no registered keeper details held by the DVLA, legislative timescales that were missed, warrants issued by the courts that have been irrecoverable by council bailiffs, and costs associated with removals of illegally parked vehicles that were deemed irrecoverable as the vehicle had not been claimed by the owner or the keeper, and any scrap revenue did not cover the full debt. We did identify in the paper and recognise that the efforts around minimising debt have historically not always been as effective as they could have been, and part of the work we're doing is to ensure that is more effective and more efficient in the future. This was a process to write off outstanding debt we can collect in tidying up our books, tidying up our financial processes, and ensure we were in a position where our financial systems were effective and efficient. And as part of that, going forward, we'll be moving to annual write-off of debt that are irrecoverable. We have still obviously some debt on the books that we haven't recovered from the previous year, which we're still working on, and there will always be a process of that. But in future, there will be a kind of annual process to make sure we don't get to a position where this builds up over a significant period of time and leaves us with a large debt to write off. So I'll leave it at that, and so I'm sure you'll have lots of questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Colleagues, given what I've said before, in terms of the guidance on time, I hope to stick to that. And so I would go straight to members for the question. And I've been given advance notice that Councillor Ken Clark and Councillor John Whitworth want to ask questions on that. Before I pass it over to Councillor Clark and Whitworth, can I ask, or can I make an observation? Newham in the press, most recent and before, we are dubbed as one of the councils that issue the most parking fines in London, if not in the country. And we are writing off this huge amount of debt. So in some ways, we're issuing a lot of parking fines, but we're not getting the money in. My question now, following from that observation, aren't we running the risk of rewarding motorists who think that if they drag it out and they persist and so on, their debt would eventually be written off? Who's going to take that question?
Well, if I come in briefly, then officers will be able to kind of give you more. And I suspect a lot of the questions will be technical and detailed, and officers will be in a better position to talk through that. I mean, I think part of the issue is in making sure we've got processes in place to ensure that we get maximum efficiency in terms of collecting what we're owed. I have to say I am sceptical about some of the press figures in terms of where we sit in the league table. Traditionally, where places like Westminster and Kensington and Chelsea have always been higher than us, and I suspect there may be some issues around their answering of FOIs and compared to our answering of FOIs. It also often comes down to how councils answer the questions that from one of these round robins that go around to all councils, and I remember them well from when I was a press officer doing them. But that aside, I think it's important we have proper, efficient processes. I think, and officers correct me if I'm right, the average rate of collection on these kind of debts across London is around 75%. So no council is collecting the full amount. There are lots of issues around that, by the nature of the city it is. But we want to make sure we're up there with a similar level to the rest of London. I don't know if perhaps Sarah might or Jamie may have something they want to add on that in just terms of processes, particularly given experiences in other boroughs.
Okay. Who's going to answer it in no more than 2 minutes?
I'm happy
Shall I come in on that one, because I'm sure we'll get into more detail that Sarah will answer later. I think that the survey that you were referring to, Chair, was maybe last year, and certainly most of the central London boroughs I would expect to issue more PCNs than Newham in the normal year, but obviously last year was anything but a normal year. And a lot of the traffic disappeared from central London. But irrespective of that, yes, we do issue a lot of PCNs, and yes, we will do better. So I think there is a ongoing set of changes that we're making to the way that we manage the flow of PCNs, the quality of PCNs that we issue, the systems that we have in place to manage the recovery of those PCNs. But as Councillor Asser has said, there's probably an upper limit of somewhere in the mid-70s, where certainly most London boroughs aim to be as far as their debt recovery. There's a range of issues why 100% of debt recovery will never be reached. But I'm sure we'll discuss those as we answer more detailed questions later on in the meeting.
So you aim to do better in terms of collection or issuing, or both?
I think there's two things. The numbers of PCNs and the numbers of PCMs. What we need to make sure is that the PCNs are issued correctly, and they're issued for the right contravention, and that we follow through the processes of those PCNs. So that's the first issue. Secondly, we no doubt we are doing better, and we will do even better in the way that we recover and track those PCNs. It's a very detailed system. There's a lot of IT that sits behind it, awful lot of effort from staff within parking services, but we will do better to make sure we recover the monies that are owed.
Okay, Councillor Whitworth.
Yes, thank you, Chair. One of the striking elements of the report to Cabinet was, as James said, that there were 4 categories really of written off debt. And one of the ones I found striking was the legislative timescale missed, because that was £5.69 million, and it seems to be, well, striking because it seems to be most within the control of the council. And the Cabinet report recognises that it's due in large part to system and process failures and human error. So there we would perhaps like to see the greatest improvement. And I note that a new debt recovery team was created in August along with the restructure. So my question really is, in the 8 months since, what is the evidence that this dedicated debt recovery team has been able to produce improvements?
Yeah, would it be possible to bring Sarah in on that one? Because I think that is an element where Sarah will be taking you through the detail of both the debt recovery system as was, and the improvements and the evidence we've got of improvements in that particular area.
Sarah, can you do this in 2 minutes, please?
I will try and do it in 2 minutes. So I think there's been great changes to the team. So the team used to have a capacity of approximately 15 members of staff, and that has increased to approximately 26 members of staff. We're looking at the response time is 56 working days in which we are meant to respond. And due to the increase in PCNs, that led to that league table being occurred. What I can tell you now is we're currently responding to correspondence on average at 47 working days, which has been slowly reducing down. And we are managing that on a weekly basis to ensure that we deliver the best value for Newham. In terms of the other timeframes that we have missed were to do with car pound removals and the fact that we have to request information from the DVLA within a set time frame, so we get the registered keepers details so we can respond accordingly. And there was a software glitch where that didn't happen automatically and wasn't picked up by all members of staff systematically to do that. That system glitch has now been repaired, and as of March of this year, all keeper details are being requested from the DVLA the day the vehicle enters, sorry, not the day, 5 days after the vehicle enters the car pound. It's done at the 5-day point because we pay for this information. And at that point is the cutoff between when most people would normally come and collect their car if they're just going to come and collect it versus requiring letters from the council. In terms of the recovery rate, which was the other question you asked, specifically with regards to the debt recovery team, 8 months isn't long enough to give you a categoric answer into the performance of that team, partly because the courts were closed due to COVID, and the ethical enforcement response that we've put in because of COVID, and making sure that we take a systematic approach, being fair to all residents, and the fact that enforcement agents weren't allowed to visit people's homes during that time period. We've only reinstated home visits as of March of this year. So I think the question is, can I come back to you in the future with how we have performed? But at the moment, what I can tell you is the performance of the team in terms of our response rate to representations has improved from past 56 days to 47 days. Every day we improve, that will affect our recovery rate and therefore will improve the response for Newham long term.
Thank you.
Councillor Ken Clark, and I see you, Councillor Lee Parker.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm glad to see that we've got nearly 2 football teams now looking after parking. My question is, in terms of accounting practice, as detailed in the Cabinet report, under the old policy, it seems the Council held such high levels of debt to try to maximise recovery, regardless of how challenging or fruitful it was. Are there any benefits to holding such apparent unrecoverable debt levels? And I was also pleased to hear in James Asser's presentation earlier on that we're going to annually writing off debt. What I've always failed to understand is why, for all these years now, we've let these amounts mount up, while most companies would do their debt adjustment at the end of each year. So can you also explain to me why it's taken so long to move to that system of debt on a yearly basis, writing it off? Thank you.
Chair, I think it's a 2-part question. I'm not quite clear on the first part. Ken, I might ask you to repeat that. And on the technical adjustment, I'll get Andrew Ward. But Councillor Clark, obviously, our bad debt, for whatever reason, has not been fully written off since 2014, 2015. Obviously, that's for a number of years, we didn't write off bad debt. I can't answer for in the past, but obviously what we have done is, how can I put it, doing proper accountancy practices, and as Councillor Asser indicated, we're going to move to a annual process as a normal business practice. So that's the answer on the bad debt. On your first part of your question, Ken, about the interplay with the accounting practices, can you slightly repeat that? And I might ask Andrew, as the qualified accountant, to come back on accountancy regulations.
But what I was getting to there, without reading the whole thing out of debt again, is basically you've held such high levels of debt to try and maximise the recovery, regardless of how challenging or fruitful it was. So what are the benefits of holding such apparent unrecoverable debt levels? Because I don't quite understand. Obviously, certain things that you do, for exactly, people not having registered their vehicle, but that should have a reasonable quick turnaround, even with clips going on, and surely those sort of debts off on a yearly basis.
Okay.
And you don't seem to be writing things off. You have allowed it, since you come into office in 2015. So you've still continued with a practice, but which most companies do, is to write off debt at the end of each year.
Okay, what I would say on that, Ken, and maybe I'll get Andrew to come in after me and perhaps Jamie Blake. What has happened, and I think it's partly indication in Sarah's answer, there's been a bit of I use the word, a bit of a transformation. I know that word is used liberally like in this council, but there has been a bit of a work done last year to review all our processes. And obviously, Sarah gave you quite an indication where we've gone from up to nearly 26 people. There's been a huge influx of members of staff into Councillor Asser's area, because I think what we can indicate is we need to better adhere to our processes. Very, very good example given by Sarah. We weren't doing the reconciliation with the DVLA and not, not talking to them and passing information. The other thing, I don't think, Ken, we were holding debt just for the sake of holding debt. I think that's the implication of your question. I don't think that's the case, if I can. But Andrew, did you want to?
Yes. Before Andrew comes in, because Terry, you did mention Andrew and Jamie. I would only take one. So who's best placed?
Yeah, it's Andrew. But
yeah, I'll take this.
Totally, Andrew can do it. But obviously, fine.
choose who's the best one to respond.
I'll take it, please,
Okay,
Chair.
thank you.
Okay, so I mean, with the question, there isn't a financial benefit to holding on to debt once all the debt recovery options and procedures have been exhausted. Once you get to the point where there is no reasonable prospect of recovery of the debt, I can't say that there's a financial or benefit to holding onto that debt. So that makes the write-off at the end of the process that produced the cabinet report entirely appropriate. What I would add in terms of accounting since 1415, it is recognised in the accounts that it is not realistic that we would recover all of the debt that is held, and that is the provision that is entered into the accounts. So at the end of each year, there is a bad debt provision is assessed. So a provision is something is effectively where we know there'll be a cost to the council, but we don't know the precise amount and we don't know the precise timing. But we do know, or we reasonably expect that it will happen in all probability. And obviously, with the history of parking debts, you had about 75% sort of general recovery levels across London. It is certain we wouldn't be able to recover all that debt. And so each year the bad debt provision was assessed and a charge made to our income and expenditure to reflect that we needed to increase the bad debt provision, so that when we got to the point of making the write-off, there was enough bad debt provision to cover that cost. And there wasn't a sudden hit or charge to income and expenditure, and it effectively was spread correctly, in my view, across the 6 years through use of that provision. So I hope that makes sense. I didn't get too technical on that. I'll just pause.
Thank you. Ken, I haven't brought you back in yet because I'm mindful of the time. If you come back in the supplementary, it has to be a very quick one with this even faster response. Ken.
All I was this very quickly. It is that basically it seems to me that the systems that have been deployed for some years now have not been the correct systems. Basically, we've now recognised that, and we're going to be much more effective than we've been in the past. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Daniel, Councillor Lee Parkway.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's about essentially the debt and obviously the accumulation of the debt. And I suppose I've got a pretty naive question, maybe. But in the private sector, you often hear of companies selling their debt and getting pennies on the pound, etc., for the debt. Is there something that stops the local authority from doing that? Some sort of law or statute? Are we not allowed to do that? Is my first question. Sarah, I see you shaking your head, so I take that as a no, we can't do that. We're not allowed to. No? Okay, that's fine. So then that explains why we are where we are. So I'd like to commend you in terms of the moves that you've taken to obviously address this issue. I know, Sarah, you said that at the moment we can't gauge how well the team are doing because of all of those different things that you said. But what is your actual target? Because I might have missed that. I know Councillor Assa said that 66% is what we're roughly doing if you look at how things are now, and that 75% is the average. Are you aiming for 80, 85, 90? What's your target? I know we can't judge on what you've done, but I want to know where you're aiming for. Thank you.
I'll answer that. In terms of selling debt, the local authority only has the responsibility to collect debt for a year. So we only get valid warrants for a year. So we only get that opportunity. We can use internal or external enforcement agents to do it, and Newham currently use their ethical internal bailiffs to do that, so that we make sure we take care of the welfare of those people whose debt we are collecting, and that we don't put further strain on other services. So we try and make sure that we're doing it in the best way possible. In terms of targets, we never say targets within parking because that would be illegal. We talk about expectations and where we want to be. In terms of collection rates, we look at what is our collection rate per PCN. So we're looking to increase our collection rate. So in 1920, the collection rate per PCN in Newham was £40.44. And we're looking to increase that to £50 per PCN issued. So that in terms of improvement. In terms of what collection we make out of the total proportion of PCNs, that figure is probably a little bit outside of our control because it depends on, so only 50% of PCNs would be issued to Newham residents. The other 50% would be issued to people who live outside of Newham, and therefore the collection ways in which we deal with both are slightly slightly different. So that takes into account one thing. The registration with DVLA falls outside of our control and is something that the police would be responsible for enforcing if people haven't got that detail. What I can say is we look at what we call persistent evaders or persistent offenders. A persistent evader is someone who has been issued more than 3 PCNs within a year. A persistent offender is someone who's been issued more than 3 PCNs in a year. A persistent evader is someone who has been issued 3 or more PCNs in a year and has not paid them when they hit charge certificate. So that's 28 days after their right of appeal. The vehicles that fall into those categories are the vehicles that we are looking to catch up with and have those conversations. So they're the vehicles we would look to work with our enforcement agent bailiffs in the first instance if they're not registered, or if they're registered, and if they're not registered, we would look in-house with our removal team to remove those vehicles from the street to try and ensure that actually when they are collected, if they are collected, we are making sure they have valid road tax and insurance before we're allowing them back onto the street.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, can I just come back in there, please?
Quick one, Danya, and that's the
Yeah,
for you.
that was a very comprehensive answer, and I really do appreciate it. And I understand from what you're saying, essentially, you're going to go up by £10 per PCN issued, which obviously varies on the number of PCNs issued, divided, and all the rest of it. Just for a very simple backbench councillor, Sarah, can I just ask, what percentage are we looking at if you hit your £50 per PCN issued? What percentage? Because I like Councillor Assel, he said, on average, 75%. We're doing 66%. I can get that. When you come back, I say, where are you at? Are you at 75, 80%? Makes sense to me. Even if you can't answer that right now, I'll accept that. But I would just like it in percentage terms, because it really does just distill it down and make it much more simpler rather than me looking at how many PCNs have been issued, divide that, work out. It's just all a bit much. Percentage would be great. Thank you.
1 minute response.
I don't have an answer right now, but what I will do is work it out and I will make sure it is provided to the panel so that you can have that information for next time.
Okay. Thank you. And just for the viewing public, who would have heard us talking about PCN, and I'm sure it's something that is of interest to most of our residents far and wide. What it is for the viewing public, it's the parking debt write-off paper went to Cabinet on the 9th of March of this year. The committee decides that it would like to discuss this item with the executive member, who is Councillor Terry Paul and Councillor James Asser, and officers to identify any lessons learned and any changes implemented since this Cabinet paper of March of this year. So that is what the conversation is all about, and that's just for the viewing public. Now, is there anyone else? If there's no one else, I shall be moving away from this item.
Chair, I think you've got 2 hands raised.
Okay.
You need to look at the electronic raising of hands as well. Or maybe
Okay, so,
some of the
right, I can see Councillor Chaudhry.
Thank you. I did raise my electronic hand long time ago.
I've raised my electronic hand after council.
Okay, I hear that.
I would like to come back in as well, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, now I can see the electronic hands, and can the officers just indicate to me when I don't notice it, right? Or you just shout it as you just done. Now I can see, Daniel, you have your electronic hands raised. You spoke already. You wanted to come back.
I've got my hand raised as well, Chair.
No, I don't think I can take, okay, so I can see Councillor Chaudhry, 1 minute.
I need more than less than 1 minute, Chair. Thank you. So first question would be that how much do we normally collect within first 2 weeks? And second question is that out of this 32 million we're talking about, what would be the admin expense in it? Thank you.
We can answer that in 1 minute, I'm sure. How much we collect in 2 weeks and what's the admin expense? Anyone, who's going to take that?
I think both of those detailed questions, Chair, we'd have to come back in with some written answers. And the admin expense will be, we can tell you how many back office, what the expenditure is for the reputations and appeals system and the back office within the parking function. We can say what that is now. I don't think we've got any real historic data about what that might have been in the past, but we can certainly put something together for you in writing after this meeting.
Yep.
I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Patel.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think my question really is actually to ask whether the officers and also the policymakers in this area are looking beyond the issue of just about fines and the collection of fines. I've just walked down Wood Grange Road. I think Jamie knows that I've been pestering him to get some enforcement done at a particular location. However, when I see that there's millions of pounds worth of uncollected fines, and I'm pretty sure even in this fiscal year that will still be the case, it begs the question that the review that you're talking about in terms of, you know, Councillor Paul saying we've got new systems and everything's going to be all bells and whistles and, you know, better than it was, and I really do hope that it will be. My question is more about, are we taking any measures to make enforcement fairer and more balanced? So, for example, first-time bus lane offenders, are we going to fine them 60 or 100 pounds, whatever it is, and those that stop in yellow box junctions? Because are we going to send them a warning letter? Are we considering that, as opposed to just punitively slapping fines, which, when you look at it, we've got a collection rate which is it's not 100%, and we're trying to get to, well, I think the average you said was 70%. We're trying to get it to higher. So I'm thinking, is there an opportunity now for us to take a holistic look at this whole area of parking fines, to make it more fairer, to make it more balanced, to make sure that, yes, those of our Newham residents who might dip into a yellow box junction, or who might dip on the left-hand side to a bus lane when there's a car coming on the opposite side, and I've dealt with an appeal like that, that we take a much more nuanced approach, as opposed to saying, right, this is it and that's what we're collecting. And my final point is the level of fines that we're charging. Do you think, and this is just an opinion, that the reason for such a high level of non-collection by councils across London is because of the level at which the fines are set? So, for example, £60 for a resident in Newham is a lot of money. Now, if we were to charge, let's say, £30, knowing that we'll have a much more higher chance of getting £30 than we would £60, wouldn't that be part of our fairer parking, which was a manifesto commitment by many of us who are from the Labour Party? Thank you for giving me the time to speak.
You're on mute, Chair.
Yeah, sorry. That was a lot of questions there. And so I suppose in fairness, I would have to give officers some latitude in terms of responding to all of that. We can discount the bit that is the speech and just focus on the question.
I'll come in first, Chair, because there were some policy issues in there, just in relation to things like bus lanes and yellow box junctions. We've just done, as councillors are aware, a process in terms of rolling enforcement cameras on some of those. What we've done is, where we've done an assessment, where we've put them in, found quite a very high level of breaches of the rules of the road, which are obviously set down by the Highway Code, including lots of illegal left turns and breaking of no entry signs on quite a high level, which obviously creates a road traffic issue. We have very high levels of road traffic accidents in this borough, so that enforcement is entirely about improving road safety. And I think we discussed it with this before. In an ideal world, cameras enforcing that would bring in no money, because everyone would be sticking to the enforcement. We are talking and we are looking at, in terms of, and this is the reason we have a new director of highways and a new assistant director of parking and enforcement, is around how we operate in terms of issuing PCNs and prioritising and doing more to ensure the main roads are running smoothly and focusing on clearing double yellow lines and that kind of thing. And I know the officers are picking that up, because that's quite important, and I'm aware of the kind of ward issue that Councillor Patel has raised. I'll hand over to officers to talk about some of the detailed stuff, but certainly on the levels of amounts we charge, that's agreed across London through the London Council's Transport and Environment Committee. We don't have the scope to vary charges. We have to get an agreement on that, but officers will be able to kind of give you more detail on that.
Thank you, James. To give me an indication of how many officers need to respond to Councillor Patel's question, how many officers are thinking of responding? I've recognized Jamie. Is there any other?
I think I should be able to cover most of it, Chair.
Okay, so you have 2 minutes to cover because I know there's a lot of questions. 2 minutes.
Okay, so can we? So PCNs, just for clarity, are issued for parking offences and for moving traffic offences. So I think there's a clear difference between those two sort of sets of offences. When we introduce new restrictions, certainly around low traffic neighbourhoods and healthy school streets, we have a period where we always send out warning notices. So that's for moving traffic. Sarah's quite handily reminded me that's for 2 weeks. So we send out 2 weeks of warning notices when anything is introduced new. I would argue quite strongly that none of the things that we bring in as decisions and parking offences across the authority are meant to be punitive. And I would argue strongly against that description of the way we run parking services. Unfortunately, especially with moving traffic offences, they are often dangerous. We've had a number of roads where we've introduced cameras in one-way streets, where we found upwards of 100, 150 cars a day going the wrong way down one-way streets. And I would say that is incredibly dangerous and practices that we need to stop. We can't always have parking attendants in those particular areas, so we manage them through cameras. As I've already said, we have a very clear way that we install those cameras. So we try our best to make sure the traffic keeps moving, and it keeps moving in the correct way, and that we follow the guidelines that are set out within London councils, the charging for PCNs, and obviously if people do pay their PCNs in the discount period, they actually get a 50% discount on the PCNs. So
can we round up your response, please? Thank you. Councillor Masters. 1 minute.
Thank you. I just wanted to sort of pick up on something Sarah said earlier, which made me think about things. What proportion of these cancelled tickets are for people out of borough opposed to in borough?
Yeah. I suppose that can be answered in 30 seconds.
Approximately 50%. However, that will depend on how accurate the DVLA data is. But I would say on average, somewhere between, it would vary between 40 and 60, depending on each batch of warrants, but about 50%.
Thank you. I'm John Whitworth, and I've seen Ken.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the reasons given for warrants being unrecoverable is that the bailiff decides that the debtor has no means to pay. So I was wondering on what criteria is the no means to pay based?
1 minute. Who's going to answer?
If Sarah could answer that one, please, Chair.
Okay, Sarah, 1 minute.
So with all bailiff teams, there is a welfare team, and they would look at the financial viability of the person in terms of the income they have coming in and their outgoings and any other debt commitments they have. So it would be done on a case-by-case basis based on that person's individual circumstance.
Thank you. Brief, quick answer. Thank you. And Ken, and then Daniel.
Yeah.
Last one is reserved for me.
Okay.
And yeah, that's the last.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. One of the things that really concerns me is the amount of cars that you already identified that aren't registered, so therefore they're not taxed. And we all know that one of the biggest hit and run situations in London is in Newham. Is there anything that we can do about the data that we have, or ways we can actually help to identify the cars that are not registered anyway, even though they're not committing an offence? where we can start to somehow address the issue of the amount of vehicles that are driving around Newham without any tax and insurance and are not even registered. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Daniel, do you want to ask your question and then
No, it's fine, Chair. It's
Pardon?
fine, Chair. No, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you've noticed you've missed Councillor Guana.
Am I going to get an answer, by the way?
Jika?
Am I getting an answer?
Okay.
Yes, you're going to get an answer.
My
I'm just
question
trying to
is
bring it.
so quick.
Belgica.
Okay, my question will be so fast. For how many years more are we going to be dragging the debt? That's all. Thank you.
Okay, so can we answer the both questions, please?
I'm really sorry, Chair. I didn't catch that second question. For how many years are we
going to be dragging the debt?
Okay, so there will always, second question first, there will always be debt. It's the way that we manage it. So we manage it, we will now manage things going forward very carefully with finance colleagues to make sure bad debt does not build up and we cover as much debt as we possibly can. But any parking service has an element of debt. I think as we've already discussed, and we're going to give members of the scrutiny panel some more information about what those figures look like. Sarah, in terms of the no insurance and no tax, I know this is a police matter, but could you just, for members' benefit, talk about the GDPR issues?
Yes. So with all the data we get from the DVLA, I'm not allowed to share that with other agencies unless it is in direct relation to a crime because of the GDPR we have with the DVLA. However, there are things you can do about non-taxed vehicles that are outside of our, if you go onto the central government's website and type in any vehicle's VRM, so vehicle registration number, you can check to see whether that vehicle has tax. It won't tell you whether it has insurance, but it will tell you whether that vehicle is taxed. Every private citizen can do that, and you can report any vehicle that you find that is untaxed on the public highway directly to the DVLA for them to enforce. And if we come across a vehicle that is untaxed and uninsured from a parking enforcement aspect, we won't release those vehicles back onto the highway.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the information.
So the last contribution is from me, and that is about removed vehicles that are removed. I was made to understand that when a PCN is issued and the vehicle is not removed within a certain time, that vehicle is subject for removal. And I was told, and I'm not sure if it's correct, it's about 30 minutes or so. And I always question this policy, and I suppose it's for the policy makers. If a vehicle is removed within 30 minutes or thereabout, and then taken to the pound, right away that I think is a £265 charge that car owner is incurring. And if it's in the pound for 2 days or more, it's incurred at £40 per day, I think, and you can correct me if these figures are wrong. So if someone cannot afford to remove their car within the first 2 days, then the third day is another £40 and so on and so on. It's just virtually impossible sometimes for them to remove their car. And I can see why 16 million write-offs there. My concern is that 30 minutes or so, if 30 minutes is correct, if the vehicle is not posing an health and safety or a danger where it's parked, why do we need to remove it so quickly when somebody may come back in the next few minutes? And I know that is a policy decision that has to be made, but it's something I just want to put out there. And I don't know who want to comment on it. Maybe the politician needs to comment, and that might be James.
Well, I'll let officers just outline exactly what our current standards are, and I'm happy to talk about the policy element of it.
In terms of the charging, we do charge £200 for removal and £65 for the price of the PCN, and then the daily storage charge are £40. In terms of our removal policy, we have a tiering system, so we tackle the worst vehicles first. So if a vehicle is parked in what we would classify a category 1 place, which is a double yellow line with curb lips, double yellow line, in a box junction or on zigzags, that's category 1, and we would look to remove those vehicles that are dangerously parked first. The second category that we always look to remove are those people we classify as persistent evaders and offenders that I've explained previously, so that we tackle that poor behaviour first. The third category would be those people who are parked in other locations, quite often could be to do with suspended bays for utilities works, so that actually we remove those vehicles so that we can support utility companies to do their job and make sure we maintain that infrastructure that is under the highway, so that actually we keep Newham moving long term. In terms of the 30 minutes, the legislation is that when we cannot remove from a bay within 30 minutes of a PCN being issued, which is to give people the opportunity to come back. So it's a minimum length of time. It doesn't mean we always remove within 30 minutes. So we would work through the categories of removals first before we do that.
So if I can just touch, Chair, on the policy side of that, because Councillor Masters has also kind of raised a bit in the chat, which I think links in. So the answer is no. One of the things we changed some time ago, and I think it was under Jamie's predecessor, was moving towards running on the kind of standards that are usual across London in terms of the way you remove, which is what Sarah has just outlined in terms of prioritising rather than just lifting everybody. I think one of the things we haven't touched on, and it relates to the kind of paper debt write-off in the pound. Chair, you correctly made the point. There comes a point where actually if you leave it in there long enough, the debt goes up on what you have to pay. That makes, if your car's worth 500 quid or £1,000, the debt could end up being worth more, and then they're clearly never going to be collected. We've had a period where cars were left for a great amount of time. So one of the processes we've done is clearing the pound of cars that clearly are never going to be collected. And there is now a process where that will be dealt with on a regular basis to make sure there isn't this big build-up we've had before, which then racks up a kind of clearly uncollectible debt. Because if you've got cars sat there for considerable months or even years, they're never going to be collected. They're just racking up debt on paper, which you know you're not going to collect. So new processes around the way the pound is managed will deal with that as well, which I think is kind of touched on in your question.
Thank you very much. I will now bring this to close. It's taken longer than I planned, but because of the members' interest on this item. Thank you very much for coming out in force to dealing with this issue. So thanks to James, Terry, Jamie, Andrew, Rahima, and I cannot see the other names. I do. It's always a danger when you decide to call names, because sometimes leave us.
I think you got everyone.
But thank you to everyone who attended.
Chair.
Yes.
Is it possible to make a comment, Chair?
Yes, you may.
Chair, one of the issues I've been asked at various meetings is about assurance. What assurances can you always ask me? What assurance can finance provide to X, Y, and Z? What I will say, finance has been involved with James and the team about some of the processes which have been excellently explained by Sarah. So I just want to put on the record, obviously, the issue about, for me, is about assurance to the committee here and to the residents of Newham, and the work we've done behind the scenes in, how can I put it, having overview of this report. And I think I can say I can provide better assurance. Now, obviously, the proof is in the pudding, Chair. Obviously, there's some new members of staff here from Councillor Asler's team, and obviously Rahima is the new, from my service area, is a new finance business partner who's directly on a day-to-day level and meets on a monthly basis with the team. But I just want to put it on the table, Chair. Often the issue I'm asked is about assurance. With the processes and the team in place, I'm better placed to say that assurance is in place. But back to the question Councillor Clark asks, it's about providing earlier on, it's about that assurance longer term. And I just wanted to put it on the record here, Chair, and because I don't think Councillor Clark got a full answer to the question he raised earlier, and I thought it's important to make that point, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, and I think we had a good conversation on this item. So thank you all who took time to attend and to respond to our questions. So have a good evening, all. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Chair. Bye.
Bye-bye. The committee will now move to item 6 on the agenda, titled COVID-19 Review Report and Recommendation. I note that the committee will review and agree the COVID-19 review report and recommendation presented by the COVID-19 Task and Finish Commission. The committee will need to agree the report before it can be presented to the executive. Therefore, I now invite Councillor Daniel Lee Parker, Chair of the said committee, to present his report and make any opening remarks. Daniel.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll keep it brief, but I do have some remarks. It is more than a year now since the global outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic, a cataclysmic shock of epic proportions which has not left any corner of society untouched. This report, which I commend to the OSC and through it to the executive, casts a penetrating look back into our collective rearview mirror, summarising all the COVID-19 Commission has done since it was established on the 15th of June 2020. Colleagues will recall that the COVID-19 Commission's foundation stones were laid at the meeting of the 15th of June 2020, where Overview and Scrutiny Commission chairs had solicited a set of COVID-19 related questions from the wider non-executive. The Mayor, Chief Executive and executive members and officers attended to be held to account by the Scrutiny Committee. Their answers lay in the groundwork for the ensuing COVID-19 Commission meetings. There was no doubt on the part of scrutiny chairs that a joined up and cross-cutting, nimble and agile scrutiny response was needed, and the COVID-19 Commission was established to play this role. Its primary purpose was to examine and make recommendations on any COVID-19 related activity and decisions made by the Council and its partners. In discharging this role, the Commission paid particular attention to, number one, examining community impact and needs and what the Council and its partners was doing to understand and meet these, and number two, examining the Council and its partners' transition to the recovery phase and return to business as usual. Before reviewing the Commission's work in a little more detail, let me emphasise, though, that the golden thread running through the Commission's work is the focus on our residents, placing them first in all our considerations, deliberations, and ultimately our recommendations. It is their lived experience which, as elected representatives of the people of Newham, always remained our primary focus, as we deliberately place the scrutiny spotlight on issues that matter to them. The Commission's initial meeting constituted an overview of the state of play at the time. But as always, putting our residents first, the Commission's emphasis was on understanding resident impact, as well as impacts on community safety, safeguarding, and health and well-being. The Commission heard from key partners, including the NHS and local community groups, as well as early learning from neighbouring boroughs. Following this, at its second meeting, the Commission focused on a matter of massive importance to residents, the challenges faced by schools as they return to in-person teaching in September 2020. Besides the Council's executive, the Commission took evidence from the National Education Union, a head teacher, a school governor, as well as the Newham Parents Association. Having done this, the Commission produced a set of recommendations encouraging better safety procedures in school and aiding teachers working from home or shielding. Given that the pandemic was moving at a rapid pace, the Commission was relentless in pursuing its work programme. And as always, placing residents first, turned its attention to local track and trace arrangements. It scrutinised the Director of Public Health's Outbreak Management Plan, which sets out what will happen in the instance of a local outbreak of COVID-19 in Newham. In addition, the Commission scrutinised proposals for the Test, Track and Trace programme in Newham, including the pilot of the NHS Track and Trace app. Given the extent of misinformation, rumour and gossip swirling around during the pandemic, a scourge which unfortunately remains with us, the Commission next looked at the Council's communications. It took evidence on the Council's campaign for COVID-19 awareness and how this could be improved. Besides holding the executive to account, the Commission also brought external expertise to bear, taking evidence from the Local Government Association, as well as a representative from the London Borough of Hackney. There is no doubt that external views strengthen the role of scrutiny, ultimately bringing additional rigour and independence to its recommendations. In October of last year, the Commission returned to the overall borough response to the pandemic. The Director of Public Health was invited to outline the Help Newham programme, Newham's emergency response to the COVID-19 pandemic and what had been learned up to that point. Newham has an especially unique demographic, all of which shapes the borough's response. Given this demographic evidence taken by the Commission shows that, as with all deep-rooted and systemic social evils, these factors are often interdependent and the intersectionality between them is of critical consideration. Indeed, and I quote from the Director of Public Health report submitted to the Commission, whilst many of these factors are correlated with the experiences of people from BAME and other diverse backgrounds, in the main, they relate to issues of poverty and social injustice, and with clearly identified health risks. At the October meeting, in line with its remit to be agile and fast in reporting its findings and recommendations, the Commission also agreed a short report for consideration by the Executive. In December 2020, the Commission was concerned about winter preparedness, as well as the onset of a next wave of the pandemic. Moving forward apace, it looked at Council preparations for expected additional waves of COVID-19 in the UK, of vital importance to our residents, especially in winter. As part of considering winter preparedness, vaccine uptake and how this was being encouraged in the borough was also placed under the spotlight. This is especially important, particularly as the uptake in Newham was considered low, making it all the more important to understand what was being done to tackle any vaccine hesitancy in the borough. I referred earlier to intersectionality and its especially vicious impact in the borough like Newham, given its unique demographic. This is very evident from the Commission work in the area of mental health. As the pandemic has shown how badly poverty and social injustice has affected the marginalised and disadvantaged, and this shows strongly when viewed through the lens of mental health impacts. This is evident when anyone who considers objectively, as the Commission did, the question, who has been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic? Objectivity aside, we can no longer hide behind clever words or endless studies. The lived experience of our residents tells who is impacted disproportionately. And it's for this reason that I commend this report and its recommendations to the overview of scrutiny and through it to the Executive. We will always place our residents first, and the Commission's report yet again demonstrates this. I close by sincerely thanking all of the witnesses who provided evidence to the Commission, as well as all who participated in any way. And my thanks to my colleagues who served tirelessly on the Commission, going above and beyond in participating in the additional and often fast-paced meetings which serving on the Commission entailed. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Any questions, Councillor Clark?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I would just like to commend Daniel for all the, I think, done a first-class job in running the task and finish group. I think I haven't seen one being run as well as he's run that. Just one thing I'd like to ask Daniel, what is your view about, and you talked about different groups and one particular group that's obviously faced up to more problems than the other group, is what do you think about the mosque being able to continue to be open during the lockdown?
Thank you very much, Councillor Clark. When you say the mosque being able to be opened, are you talking about all places of worship? Because as I understood it, churches, gurdwaras, everywhere was allowed to be open. So is that the basis of your question, or are you specifically referring to mosques?
As far as I understand it, was the mosques that were actually, and gurdwaras that were allowed to continue. Churches were restricted, I understand.
I don't understand.
To single prayer.
Yeah, I didn't understand it that way, Councillor Clark. I took it that all places of worship were treated equally. So if you've understood it differently, unfortunately, I cannot attest to that. But obviously that was government policy that decided that places of worship could stay open. That was the government that made that decision. That wasn't Newham Council. So in terms of your initial question in regards to the mosques and what I thought about the mosque being allowed to stay open, unfortunately, I just didn't recognise that. And we didn't see that throughout our study. It was actually all places of worship that were allowed to stay open. But thank you very much for your question.
Thank you. Susan, you have a hand. Is that an old hand or a new one?
Sorry, a very old one.
Okay, can you remove it, please? Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. I haven't seen anyone else, so I now move that the committee agree COVID-19 review report and recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, John. John requests seconder. Thank you very much. Councillor, it's you again. I'll be moving on to item 7. The committee will now move to item 7 on the agenda, titled Serious Youth Violence and its Effect on Young Women in the Borough, Review Report and Recommendation. I know that the committee will review and agree the serious youth violence and its effect on young women in the Borough Review Report and recommendations presented by the Crime and Antisocial Behavior Scrutiny Commission. The committee will need to agree the report before it can be presented to the executive. I now move that Councillor Daniel Lee Parkway, Chair of the Crime and Antisocial Behavior Scrutiny Commission, make his opening remarks and present his report. Now, I notice, I do not want to burst your bubble. I notice you make a very comprehensive and lengthy presentation of the first one. If this one could be slightly shorter, Councillor Lee Parkway, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. And you'll be happy to hear that it is definitely shorter. Okay. The Crime and Antisocial Behaviour Scrutiny Commission initiated a review into serious youth violence and its effect on young women in the borough prior to the outbreak of the global coronavirus pandemic. This report and its recommendations, which I commend, is the culmination of the Commission's work on this unpalatable subject. I have no hesitation in commending this report into youth violence and its impact on young women, and especially its recommendations to the executive. This is because it amplifies the voice of a formerly marginalised young woman referred to in the Commission's report by the pseudonym Jane Harris. She has first-hand experience with violence and gang-related activity, although I am pleased to add that she is on a positive life path and now given counsel and other support she receives. Nonetheless, all the evidence we heard from the council, its partners, as well as academics in the field, corroborates her brave testimony, making her voice all the more powerful. It goes without saying that we cannot ignore her or the voices of those young women presently caught up in the plight she once was in, or as we hear their voices echoed vicariously through hers. There are many in our society who are overlooked as a matter of course, and young women all too regularly constitute one of these marginalised demographics. That intersectionality exacerbates overlooking any particular demographic is the real horror of any marginalised person's lived experience, and none of us can be under any illusions that the lived experience of young women caught up in youth violence, criminality, and gang activity is particularly horrific. It is, in brief, intolerable. From this perspective, besides looking at the broader determinants of youth violence and its effects on young women, the Commission focused specifically on their lived experience to vivify the importance of the Commission's support of all the Council and its partners are currently doing to combat this scourge. Bringing their experience to life in this way also underscores both the importance and urgency of the Commission's report's recommendations. It has been recognised by the Metropolitan Police that the involvement of young women in gang-related criminal activity across London is largely hidden and undoubtedly underreported. This suggests an area of urgent attention to reveal more fully the extent of this hidden activity, bearing in mind that is the abject horror of the daily lives of young women that remains concealed. As Sophie Linden, London's Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime, says, it is vital that we fully understand the complex causes of violence and its impacts on women and girls in London. Besides taking evidence from a wide range of key stakeholders covering the Council's executive as well as its partners, the Commission intentionally sought evidence from a young woman directly impacted by youth and gang violence. Her experience, reported on below under the pseudonym Jane Harris, gives this report the reality that is sometimes missing from reports of this nature. It is a humble privilege for the Commission to have heard from Jane Harris, and we thank her in particular for her brave, frank, and open testimony. Her story emphasises the need for stronger joined-up partnership working, reflected on more fully below, as well as the crucial importance of grounded and consistent support based on an enduring relationship of mutual trust, the type of relationship that develops through interaction with the same social worker over time. There are two central aspects to the recommendations the Commission has produced. The first of these is the urgent need to develop and implement a comprehensive anti-gangs and exploitation strategy focused on the lived experience of young women. This strategy should include a clear emphasis on preventative measures on the one hand, as well as supportive mechanisms for young women on the other. The second is generally true of so much of the work of key stakeholders trying to improve society in general. Strengthening our joined up partnership approach to deal more effectively with the eradication of this issue, this is supported by the triangulation of evidence taken by the Commission, as it was echoed by more than one key stakeholder. Joined up partnership working would help to improve outcomes for young women. Evidence-led by prominent academics in this field only serve to emphasize this point, suggesting that it was especially important that partnership working include local organisations and charities in Newham. It is, though, Jane Harris who deserves the last word. Marginalised as many young women caught up in youth and gang violence are, her voice should be heard loudly and clearly by all policy and decision makers. She, through her lived experience, has articulated the case for the recommendations contained in this report, and we would be committing a grave moral mistake if we were to ignore her often marginalised voice, or through her, the voices of all those young women she represents. I hope that, if anything, this report amplifies her voice. In closing, I would like to thank the members of the Commission for their unfaltering diligence, commitment and participation. I would also like to thank all of those who shared evidence with the Commission. And finally, I would like to thank the Executive for the time it is taking to consider this report and implement its recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Daniel. Any member? In the absence of a member indicating to speak, I now move that the committee agree to serious youth violence and its effect on young women in the borough report and recommendation. Do you have a seconder? Thank you, Alicia. The committee will now move to item 8 on the agenda, titled Mental Health Services Review, Report and Recommendation. I note that the committee will review and agree the Mental Health Services Review Report and Recommendations by the Health and Other Social Care Scrutiny Commission. The committee will need to agree the report before it can be presented to executive. I now invite Councillor Alicia Chaudhry, Chair of Health and Other Social Care Scrutiny Commission, to make some opening remarks regarding the review into Mental Health Services Review and Report and its recommendation. Councillor Chaudhry.
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't think I can speak as fast as Councillor Lipakwe, but I will try my level best to stick to 5 minutes, and also it's the time to break the fast as well, so I'll try to be as fast as possible. I have already reported to the committee about the Commission's work related to vaccination at the last meeting. However, the Commission did also agree to look at the issue of mental health services as part of its work program. As the Commission had carried out this review, we thought that it was prudent to present these findings in a short summary report to the executive and our NHS partners. This is a recognition many mental health services have been bumpered in the borough in light of the coronavirus, especially in how they were delivered to the public. Therefore, some of the evidence was taken pre-pandemic. The Commission agreed at this meeting in October 2019 to hold 3 evidence sessions and divided the review into the following subject area. First, an overview of mental health service provision in the borough. Number 2, children and young people, children and adolescent mental health services, in short, CAM and Head Start. Number 3, over 65's mental health service provision. Its first evidence session in November 2019, the Commission heard from the Cabinet member, officers, the local CCG and East London Foundation Trust. The Commission was given a detailed breakdown of the mental health services that were provided in the borough. We were also told about some of the innovative work that was being carried out, such as the collaborative work between ELFT, East London Foundation Trust, council services, and how they engage with the police and GPs. I was pleased to hear about the East London Foundation Trust Newham Center for Mental Health would establish a new service at Newham University Hospital. I was also pleased to hear about the additional funding that was made available for the pregnant women and new mothers and children and adolescent mental health services. The local CCG have confirmed that it continued to invest more year on year into local emotional well-being and mental health services for children. We would expect and hope that more funding be provided to reflect the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on many of our children and young people and their mental health. In the second session, we have heard from officers from Council, the local CCG and East London Foundation Trust as we discuss the children's and adolescent mental health services at the Head Start program. It was refreshing to hear about all the work being carried out by those that work in Head Start program and by camps funded by National Lottery. Besides officers, 2 senior school leaders explained the way Head Start and camps had helped to reduce stigma in regards to mental health in their schools. They were excited by the respect of the Head Start program continue in some form. Our final session in last September 2020, we were briefed about the mental health service provision for over 65s. Alongside this, we were given an overview of mental health services in light of the many changes that they had been implemented due to the onset of the pandemic. The report outlined how the Council and the NHS partners were able to undergo a huge and rapid digital transformation, allowing them to develop new methods to stay connected with patients. I think that as members, we can all appreciate the efforts of Council and NHS staff to ensure that our residents could access services in this new climate. The Commission also heard about the projects such as moving one of the wards, Dementia Association ward that was based at Myland Hospital to East Ham Care Centre. This gave us an insight to the plans that had been implemented due to the pandemic. It was also uplifted to hear that the Council had held workshops last summer to hear from interested parties to consider the impact of the pandemic and how it has affected mental health and well-being of the borough's residents. We hope that what the Council heard would help shape services in the future. We also were pleased to hear from NHS partners that they would be focusing on health inequalities and addressing issues that were identified in different communities in the borough. I wanted to conclude that recommendation recognize that mental health services are in a flux as we still don't know the full impact of the pandemic in our mental health. So we do ask the executive and our NHS partners to keep service provision under review and consider where possible to allocate additional funding for mental health. I thank all our officers, especially Roger Raymond in particular, my Commission colleagues, all the witnesses from internal as well as external. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Councillor. I now move to members. And I recognize Councillor Masters.
Thank you. And I'd like to congratulate Aisha Chowdhury on taking on what's an absolutely huge subject at a really, really difficult time. We also looked at mental health services in our COVID-19 task and finish. And one of the things that we pinpointed was the lack of consistency of mental health services across our primary care networks that are being built across our different sort of GP-led patches. Now, as we've got a white paper coming through on health reorganisation and there's a shift of services into our sort of primary care areas out of hospitals, I really feel this should be part one of an ongoing scrutiny. I mean, as you say, that there's going to be a lot of further pressures as we sort of come out of the pandemic, but also with the reorganisation of our health services. There are sort of high levels of risk here. So what I would be keen to see is that this report is part one and we can sort of have a part two. And also the other point I'd make is I would imagine I'm not alone in, as a councillor, hearing many stories from residents of points where they haven't managed to access health services or they don't know how to sort of access health services. And I'm just wondering whether, and I know it's always really difficult when you scrutinise services provided by partners, because they're always very convincing and they come with a great list of schemes to actually sort of do more benchmarking and start off from the point of independent witnesses who are in a position to critique and look at best practice outside of our borough, just to look at, you know, where we might have gaps. Because I think otherwise the problem we have as councillors is we're coming to these services not being health professionals, and I just think we're at a disadvantage in a way we probably aren't.
I guess there's a question somewhere there.
No, there's several questions. I mean, I've already asked the question about this being part one of a post-pandemic review, but also I'm asking with that review if we need to start from the point of view of independent witnesses from other boroughs and elsewhere in within mental health services who can sort of independently assess the services we're receiving from a point of view of health expertise that we as councillors don't have. Because I think that's one of the challenges, and being a former lead of health.
You're still making speech.
Okay,
question.
But I have asked several questions in that.
Okay, and I'm not sure it's fair on the on Councillor Chaudhry in terms of that long presentation if she can remember all the questions. Can you,
do you
want me to sum up and come back?
I think I have got the summary, and maybe we can, yeah, let me try. First of all, I would like to say I do share your concerns, and I believe that there is a need for ongoing work, continuous work, especially due to the pandemic. Many people have got, circumstances have changed in so many different ways, and therefore it's going to be really important, especially at this time, and especially next year in particular, that we monitor continuously, and all the services are reviewed regularly. So which is there is no doubt at all, and I do share most of your concern, especially you are coming from your personal experience. You have got lots of experience in this field, and I feel that all your comments are really important and valid. Now, number two, it is also important that we do share the similar experiences in other authorities, and therefore independent witnesses are a great idea. So if I just look at the witnesses we had from the local schools, they were excellent. The information we had from them was really unique and helpful. And same thing we should be doing in the future as well. So in brief, again, I do agree with all the comments you have made and the request you have. But only thing is, like, next meeting is going to be our last final meeting for the this municipal year. Next year, if I am re-elected, then I would be able to take your recommendation and suggestions. If not, then whoever it is, I'm sure they will take that forward. In the meantime, I'm sure Roger will be making notes of all the comments you have made. Thank you very much. If I have missed anything.
Very comprehensive question and comprehensive response. Any other member? Okay, in the so can I now move that the committee agree the mental health services review report and its recommendation? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Masters, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Are the report and recommendations that we have heard in the two reports, are they all agreed? Thank you. And can I just say, the presentations were very impressive by both members. The reports were very equally impressive. So thank you to you both and the officers that supported this and the commission members. So thank you all for the brilliant work that you've done. Thank you all. The commission will now move to item 9 on the agenda, titled Disparity in Education Attainment Task and Finish Commission. Please first note the name change in the Task and Finish Commission, now entitled The Relationship Between Black Boys and the Borough. The committee will note that this committee has been asked to establish a Task and Finish Commission and agree the terms of reference as published in the supplementary agenda. I propose that the relationship between Black Boys and the Borough Task and Finish Commission be established. May I have a seconder? Councillor Lee Parkway, thank you. Is that agreed by all? Can I see a show of hands? Thank you. Does the committee like to accept the terms? Would the committee accept the terms of reference for the relationship between Black Boys and the Borough Task and Finish Commission as proposed? Or would any committee member like to suggest amendment to the terms of reference before they are agreed? And these have been published. Councillor Lee Parkway.
Thank you, Chair. I don't actually want to make an amendment. I just want to welcome this commission and just to say how important I think it will be and also what value it will bring to the lives of Newham residents, because this is an issue that has been going on for quite a while. And I just think it's something that we needed to look at. So I just really do welcome the starting of this commission. And I just thank you as chair of it for doing so. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Before we go to the vote to formally commission this, I would make a few comments and then hand over to anyone else who want to make some brief remarks, and then we go to the vote. I've said in other places, other committees, especially in the Education and Children's Commission, when I see in the statistics, the figures of Black boys, where they are overrepresented in certain areas like the criminal justice system and underrepresented in terms of educational attainment. It's not a nice read for most of us, especially for some of us who live it. And I make no apology of this as a Black man who have Black sons and nephews and relatives, etc. To me, it's personal in many ways because I'm living it in many ways. And I've been in this country for nearly 40 years. And from the time I stepped foot in this country, being involved in politics in school government bodies in the late 80s to now, the same story. They are underachieving and we are trying, and they're underachieving and we are trying. But you know, it's not, whatever is happening doesn't seem to be doing the job it's supposed to be doing because they're still underachieving. I am not proposing that we would be able to have a magic bullet and fix everything once this commission has completed this work, but at least it should go somewhere to enlighten this council and our partners what the issues might be in causing this huge disparity in educational achievement and in involvement in the criminal justice system, etc. To do this and to do it justice, we cannot just look at educational disparity and those that involve in the criminal justice system. We have to look at health, we have to look at housing, we have to look at the social issues. So it has to be a wide-ranging commission, and hence it's going to be completely cross-cutting across the council. And I am proposing to invite expert witnesses to give evidence and expert witnesses to sit and be co-opted onto this commission. that is the only way we can add value and make this, the recommendation, impactful when it is presented to council. So it will be a borough-wide effort because there's a lot of our partners and key stakeholders out there that we need to talk to. This is not basically just about Newham Council, it's about our schools, it's about our GPs, it's about primary health, mental health, etc. It's criminal justice, it's everything that affects these boys and their relationship with the borough, how they view the borough, how they behave towards the borough, and how the borough behave towards them. So it's a serious commission. It will be going into the next municipal year. And once it is being commissioned, the timelines will be set. So at this stage, I have no idea when it's going to be finishing, but hopefully we'll be able to do a good piece of work here. So thank you, colleagues. Anyone else? Does any member want to make any contribution?
Yeah, Chair, can I make a contribution?
Yes.
I just think obviously it's a bigger issue than just our borough, and I wonder if there's any work being done by some other boroughs that where there may be some successes or other boroughs that are struggling with a similar issue. So I don't think we can just say it's a Newham problem. So even though the idea is to try to see if we can, as a council, sort of make things better, I wonder if there's other sort of examples out there where councils have all made some progress or not made progress.
Thank you. Can I just, I've just looked at my battery level and run the risk of being cut off. So can I just have a brief moment to just switch on to ensure that I'm not cut off? Sorry about this. Can I just ask for 2 minutes adjournment? Is that agreed?
Yeah.
Hello, colleagues. Okay. Thank you for that brief adjournment. In response to your comments, Paul, you are correct. It is not just a Newham issue, by no means. It's a nationwide issue. We will be journal lessons on good practices, work done, reports, etc. that is out there by various boroughs, cities, what have you, work that professionals have done far and wide, perhaps even overseas, because I'm sure it's not just contained within the UK. I know America and elsewhere, in some of their cities, they suffer the same plague. We will be drawing on experience and lessons learned, but we can only influence Newham. And that is why it's about Newham and the relationship. So whatever we do, we hope to bring good practice. We hope to understand the Newham issue, taking into account the national context and even overseas international context, but to understand what's happening in Newham and how Newham can improve a lot. The mayor has been investing tremendous amount of money into the Brighter Futures and into the young people services. And so that also should go some way to addressing these two, to give not just, to give all our children, all of them, including the Black boys, a better life chances. Anyone else? Ellen.
Yeah, I'm very pleased that we're going to be doing this. I do think we need to listen to the voice of Black boys. We saw from the previous review on youth violence and young women how helpful the opinion and the experience of the person that was spoken about in that report gave to the whole report. And I think it's really important to listen to our Black boys and their experience, as well as other experts.
Thank you. Any other member? If not, okay, right. So once this report is, once this task and finish is commissioned this evening, the chairs would set about asking for expression of interest and agreeing the panel, and also the chairs would be speaking with officers to co-opt expert witnesses or experts onto the Task and Finish Commission to add value to the commission. So I now move to asking this committee to accept the terms of reference. Does the committee accept the terms of reference for the relationship between Black boys and the Borough Task and Finish Commission? Okay, thank you. I've seen about 5 hands, and I'll leave it for Roger to decide, or for Janine to decide which one to accept, which one we see for us. Thank you very much indeed. We now move to item 10, and I was hoping to finish by 8:30, although we're within time, but I do need to conclude because I know some of our colleagues are needed to conclude their fasting. The committee will note that I am still continuing to meet regularly with the mayor and chief executive. The committee will also note that the Review and Scrutiny Commission chairs continue to meet regularly. Now, we need to be making some decisions, colleagues, this evening. And due to the limited time between now and the annual general meeting of the council, the annual report and the executive scrutiny protocol needs to be finalized. I therefore ask the committee to give dedicated powers to overview and scrutiny chairs to agree the final version of the annual report and the scrutiny protocol. I would remind, is that agreed? Okay. I now moved on to the second part of this. As I mentioned before, can the committee also give dedicated powers to the chair and the committee's chairs to agree the membership of the Task and Finish Commission for the relationship of Black boys and the Borough? Is that agreed? Thank you. Now move to item 11. I invite scrutiny chairs to give their report. Colleagues, given the time that we have and the excellent report that we've had from Councillor Chaudhry and the Parkway, can I ask that we defer this item to the next meeting? Is that agreed?
Chair, I'm happy to defer it, but can I just say, obviously the municipal year is ending, so just as chairs, I just want to say thank you, to all of the commissions and all of our colleagues here. It's been fantastic, so thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Same thank you from me as well to everyone.
Okay.
And me too.
Okay. Appointment. The committee has a standing item called appointment on the agenda. There's no appointments to be made at this meeting. So I now move on to item 13, our work program, which is agenda item 13. Does any member wishes to make any comments? Thank you. And I'll move to item 14, and that is the forward plan, the council's forward plan. Does any member have any observation, comments as a result of the forward plan? Item 15 is the last item. This is most likely the last of our meetings before the end of the municipal year. It has been a roller coaster year. We last had about 2 years ago, because our last report was 1 year after 2018, which was 2019. And after the 2019 council AGM, we have not had another one since. Since June 2020, since June of 2020 to now, we have not stopped. In Scrutiny, has worked tremendously, very hard throughout the summer. Never in the history of Newham Scrutiny, we've worked throughout the summer and throughout Christmas. We worked until the 22nd of December, and on the 6th of January, we were there again, working up until now, and there's still a few more commission. For instance, tomorrow I have the children, young people and children scrutiny commission. So it has been a roller coaster year with COVID and everything. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for the hard work that we have put in this. The team have done its job as honest keep. So thank you very much. And I hope to see a refreshed, vibrant Scrutiny, whatever happens in the new municipal year. And welcome again, Paul, to your first meeting of this municipal year and your last meeting.
Thank you, Chair. It's been really interesting. Thank you.
Yes. So we hope to see you in the new municipal year.
Definitely.
Okay. So with that, I now formally move to item 15, the date of our next meeting, that we would, chairs and I and officers will be consulting and publish the date of the next meeting. So thank you all for attending. Have a good municipal year end. See you soon in other places. Thank you.